Hello, welcome. So, I wanted to do a video on Donald Trump. I know, controversial, but I thought it important to do it. Yeah, it's just mainly to do with his kind of treatment in the mainstream media, which I always find quite interesting. I mean, I'm not in no way an actual supporter of his overt kind of politics at all, but it's just his kind of treatment that kind of makes me think, you know. Essentially, obviously, Donald Trump was, surprisingly elected last year. And then, considering the amount of negative like press he seemed to get in America and across the world, it really like fascinating that he was actually elected. Just because obviously the wealth of propaganda kind of against him just should have like predisposed him to completely lose and to Hillary to win. So I think it just goes to show the kind of the grip of the mainstream media on sort of humanity is kind of slipping away. I know a lot of people still do perceive sort of mainstream journalism to being sort of righteous and like a force for good, but I mean, personally, I'm really sort of view it as a mouthpiece of sort of quite dark, covert security services to kind of a high end sort of banking. Essentially kind of warmongers a lot of the time, trying to profiteer out of creating enemies and invading countries. To me, that's what the mainstream media a lot of the time kind of represents, and it basically skews humanity's kind of understanding of ourselves and what the true nature of reality is. So yeah, I'm kind of very skeptical about mainstream media, but I see a lot of similarities between the grip on power by the mainstream in the UK and the US. And in the UK, there's Jeremy Corbyn. If you've never heard of him before, he's sort of the head of the leader of the Labour Party, and he was elected on a wild card and surprised everyone of becoming the leader because he's quite kind of left wing. And I always find left and right wing quite unhelpful because, you know, the world is a complex place, and like dividing it into two teams like left and right is just crazy to me. But I view that as a system of control. If you sort of divide and rule. So yeah, he was elected, and he's very kind of socialist. But again, he's had a similar sort of rough ride in the mainstream media. He's been sort of demonized since the very beginning, and it was, although he didn't win an election, he did pretty well in comparison to what other people thought was going to happen. So that makes me think again, because of the pure vitriol in the mainstream on TV, newspapers, and people just writing him off as never going to get in because his policies apparently weren't credible. Somehow he sort of maintained his power and also gained power. And now the sort of current Conservative government are looking weak in comparison. And again, I see a lot of parallels between UK and US sort of mainstream media, really their grip kind of slipping away. In the US, I mean, the kind of a lot of the support that he's gained has been through the alternative media. So obviously the usual suspects like InfoWars. But what I always found kind of strange is that a lot of the spiritual kind of alternative media in America has been sort of pro kind of Trump supporters. And, you ask the question, why is that? That's quite interesting. Although now, unfortunately, if again, polls are to be believed, his approval rating is down to kind of 36%. So he's not as popular as he used to be. But I mean, some of the kind of the media attention, the negative reporting, a lot of the times has been comical, both for kind of Corbyn and Trump. And again, why is that? What's kind of behind that? I mean, if you look at the policies of sort of Jeremy Corbyn, I mean, ideologically, they're completely different. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is like completely anti-nuclear. He's pro high taxes for corporations and kind of the wealthy. He's pro kind of regulation, and he's pro kind of welfare. He wants free education. He wants a free health service. He wants all of that. Whereas Donald Trump, in each one of those points, he's opposite. He likes nuclear weapons. He wants tax cuts for rich and sort of corporations. He wants deregulation. He doesn't like, welfare, because obviously he's trying to get rid of Obamacare at the moment. So in a lot of ways, he's a corporate wet dream, So in so many ways, he should be backed by all these kind of corporate mainstream forces. But why isn't he? You got to think about why that is, because that seems strange to me, like really, really strange. I mean, if you look at sort of like George Bush, I mean, in so many ways, if you were a balanced media, you would be attacking him vehemently because invading country in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and a lot of them turn out to be fraudulent wars based on, evidence that was non-existent. And the same with Hurricane Katrina, that happened. He pretty much left, you know, a lot of people to die. And then through that policy, why did he not get more negative reporting in the mainstream media in the US in comparison to sort of Donald Trump? So again, is there something going on? And if we can look at Donald Trump's inauguration speech, maybe it gives an indication why. I mean, he said this. This is a section of the speech. He goes, "We stand at the birth of a new millennium, ready to unlock the mysteries of space, to free the earth from the miseries of disease and harness the energies, industries, and technologies of tomorrow." Now, a lot of people were hearing that speech and they were sort of seeing that maybe he has an understanding about the deep state. He has an understanding about secrecy and the suppression of technologies. So a lot of people are viewing that speech as him kind of understanding the deep state and a lot of the issues that come from that, such as the paedophilia, the sort of satanic elite religion that they have, child trafficking, suppression of like propulsion systems, suppression of free energy, all of that. So people a lot in the alternative media and spiritual media perceive him having an understanding of it and wanting to end it. So that potentially is why they're getting behind him. And again, that is why the mainstream media is so against him. Even though on the overt politics side, he looks like he should be their hero, but behind the scenes, maybe he isn't. So again, that's an interesting point to consider. Also, at the sort of start of his presidency, he was very kind of against security services like the FBI and the CIA. And again, I mean, I view sort of security services a lot of the time for being quite a dark force that works kind of against humanity and not really pro it. I mean, anything that has secrecy involved, for me, I'm just very, very suspicious. And again, that could be a reason why kind of the spiritual alternative media is getting behind him, because again, he has a similar mistrust of those institutions. And then if you're looking at sort of like scholars like David Wilcock, who again is quite a spiritual person, he's getting behind sort of Donald Trump. He's obviously doesn't agree with a lot of stuff that he says, but he calls him a battering ram, and like he's going to blow a hole through the fortress of this deep state, to then sort of gain entry and then sort of try and change stuff for the better. And then a lot of people are saying it's probably not going to last a long time, but it's just that initial kind of smash into the fortress that's going to hopefully, change things for the better. On the 31st of January, Michael Salla wrote on his website an article involving intelligence that had come from Corey Good. And Corey claimed that actually Donald Trump was preparing during his presidency to disclose about Antarctica, how the fact it was a flash frozen alien civilization, essentially the lost city of Atlantis that we know about. And then also on the 21st of March, Donald Trump was reported to have released a classified memorandum, and it wanted the patents for anti-aging and also free energy to be released. So within covert circles, he was operating, with that policy in mind. So that's again really interesting. Again, points towards maybe potentially why the mainstream media have sort of tarred him so much with so much negative coverage. And then also why the spiritual media in the US particularly has also kind of got behind him, because, me included and all of them, we want disclosure of the reality of what it is to be human, about suppressed technologies and or kind of lost history that we don't know about, and the sort of dismantling of the deep state. These are all things that the alternative media, the spiritual media, we all want that. So again, that's, why all these entities are getting behind him potentially. And what's also like interesting about him is the fact that he has his own money. So he, in many ways, he's kind of not really potentially corruptible by the usual forces. A lot of politicians, especially the people who become presidents, and they make a lot of money sort of leaving office, and it generally tends to come from the kind of the deep state financial institutions. And because he's got his own money, obviously he doesn't need that sort of source of income. So uh, again, he's a threat to them. So again, that's potentially why he's being attacked so much. And the sort of the narrative that has been sold is constantly about Donald Trump's links to Russia, and there's been no real evidence to that. And a lot of the sort of news networks have been constantly sort of saying the reason he won the election was due to Russian hacking. And again, there's been no evidence for that. And I mean, especially if you sort of look at the recent sort of WikiLeaks disclosure from Vault 7, and they talk about a CIA technology called the Marble Framework. And what Marble does is allows the CIA to hack and make it look like it's from a foreign power. So then if there is any hacking that is potentially found, you've no way of knowing whether it is actually Russian in origin or whether it's actually done on home soil through the CIA pretending just to stir up problems. I mean, CNN have also been found to be fabricating stories about Russia's collusion with Donald Trump. And then there's been a producer that's been filmed on YouTube gloating about the fact they fabricated stories for ratings, and also various journalists in CNN have been fired for like creating false stories, fake news, as part of their network and their obsession with Russia and Donald Trump. I mean, don't get me wrong. Again, I repeat, I'm not kind of ideologically aligned with him, but I can get behind the whole deep state, you know, dismantling of the deep state and the sort of the ending of secrecy of so many different aspects to do with humanity. And the only sort of Russian link that they can find, which has been self-disclosed recently, is through Donald Trump's son, who was met with a Russian lawyer and Russian officials during when Donald Trump was actually campaigning, trying to find if they had any dirt essentially on Hillary Clinton. And yet that is bad in politics. You shouldn't do that. And that is not great. But again, it doesn't point at all towards like Russian hacking and actually swinging the entire election. Thank you so much for joining me. Yeah, I just wanted to give my thoughts on kind of Donald Trump and the media response to him and how that makes me think about potentially what is going on behind closed doors in covert circles to have like such negative coverage. And again, I see a lot of parallels between the sort of the loss of power of the media, both in the US and the UK, and I thought it worthy to talk about really. Take care. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.